The day we buried my son, I wore the wrong shoes. I know that sounds like a strange thing to remember, but that's what grief does to you. It latches on to the smallest, most useless details while the big things blur together into something you can't look at directly. The casket, the flowers, the way the pastor's voice kept catching. None of that felt real. But my feet hurt, and that was real. I stood at the graveside in black heels I hadn't worn since my niece's wedding 3 years ago, and I just stared at the ground because I couldn't look up. My son was 43 years old. He was supposed to outlive me by decades. They said it was a heart attack. Sudden cardiac arrest, the doctor told us, standing in that hallway with his clipboard and his careful voice. My son had been healthy. He jogged 3 mornings a week. He didn't smoke. He barely drank. But sometimes, the doctor said, these things happen without warning. Genetic. Electrical. Just the heart deciding it was done. I nodded. I signed the papers. I let my daughter-in-law lead me to a chair in the waiting room. And then I sat there, in that waiting room, in that horrible fluorescent light, and I thought, something is wrong. I couldn't tell you why I thought it. Not then. It was just a feeling. The kind that lives in your chest before your mind catches up to it. My son had called me 11 days before he died. We talked for almost an hour about the garden he was planning in the backyard, about whether he should refinance the house, about nothing important. He sounded fine. He sounded like himself. And at the end of the call, right before we hung up, he said something that I let slip past me at the time. He said, Mom, if anything ever happens to me, look in the filing cabinet in my home office, the blue folder. I laughed. I told him he was being dramatic. He laughed too. We said goodnight. That was 11 days before he died. I didn't think about the filing cabinet until 3 weeks after the funeral, when his neighbor called me. His name was Theodore. Theo, everybody called him. He'd lived next door to my son for 6 years. They watched football together. He helped my son install a ceiling fan once. They were that kind of neighbors. The easy kind, not close friends, but comfortable. When Theo called me, it was a Thursday afternoon in March, and I was sitting at my kitchen table staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold. He said, I'm sorry to bother you. I know this is a hard time, but there's something I need to show you. Can you come over? And please, don't mention it to Simone first. Simone is my daughter-in-law. I went cold. Not afraid exactly. Something quieter than fear. I told him I'd be there by noon. I almost told Simone anyway. We were at close before my son died, and we weren't close after. But she was the one organizing everything. The estate, the accounts, the death certificates. She had a system for everything. She was always on her phone. I told myself that was just how she processed grief, that everyone grieves differently. But in the back of my mind, the thing I'd been trying not to think about kept sitting there, patient and heavy. I didn't tell her. I drove to my son's house, Simone's house now, legally. And Theo was waiting on his porch. He looked tired. He had the look of a man who'd been carrying something he didn't know how to put down. He took me around the side of his house to the detached garage. Inside, on a metal shelving unit, was a cardboard box. My son's name was written on it in my son's own handwriting. Theo said, he brought this over about 2 weeks before he passed. He said he needed me to hold on to it. He said if anything happened to him, I should give it to you. Not to Simone, specifically not to Simone, but he made me promise to wait at least a month. He said he needed time to try to work something out. Theo paused. I almost didn't call, but I kept thinking about what he said. He was real specific about the month. My hands were shaking when I opened the box. Inside was a blue folder, and inside the folder was a life insurance policy worth $800,000, with me listed as the sole beneficiary. Not Simone, not joint, just me, updated 4 months before he died. There was also a handwritten letter, 4 pages, front and back, in my son's cramped handwriting. I stood in Theo's garage and read every word. My son had found out something about Simone approximately 6 months before he died. She had taken out a second mortgage on their home without telling him, forged his signature on the paperwork. The equity she'd pulled out, $212,000, was gone. He didn't know where, not entirely, but he had suspicions. He found wire transfers in a joint account she didn't know he had access to. The money had moved in chunks to an account he couldn't trace. He was trying to find out whose account it was. He had also, in the weeks before he died, consulted a divorce attorney. He wrote, "I don't know if this is something she planned or something that just got out of control. I want to believe the second one. But I'm scared, Mom. I'm scared in a way I don't know how to explain to you without worrying you. So I haven't said anything. I'm handling it. I think I'm handling it." He wasn't, in the end, able to handle it. I drove home, and I sat in my car in my own driveway for a long time. Here's what I knew about myself. I am 67 years old. I spent 31 years as a registered nurse, the last 12 of them in the ICU. I have watched people die, and I have watched people be saved, and I have learned in all those years the difference between something that looks medical and something that isn't. I know what sudden cardiac arrest looks like in a 43-year-old man with no prior history. I know what the labs look like, what the imaging looks like, how it presents. I hadn't asked to see my son's medical file. I'd been too deep in grief to think of it. I wasn't too deep anymore. I called my son's physician's office the next morning and requested a copy of his medical records. I had to fill out paperwork as next of kin. Simone, as a spouse, was listed first, but the physician's office confirmed I was listed as secondary next of kin, which gave me access. The records arrived by secure mail 8 days later. I sat at my kitchen table with those records in a legal pad, and I read through everything carefully. The toxicology report was standard, negative across the board. Or so it appeared at first. But I noticed something that the ER physicians had noted and then, seemingly, set aside: an elevated potassium level. Significantly elevated. High enough that it had been flagged in the initial blood work, attributed to hemolysis of the sample, which is what happens when a blood sample is mishandled, and not investigated further. Potassium. I stared at that word for a very long time. In nursing, we had a phrase, the undetectable poison. Not literally undetectable, but in the context of cause of death. In a post-mortem, elevated potassium is expected as a natural byproduct of cell death. If you gave someone a lethal potassium injection and they died and the body wasn't found immediately, the post-mortem potassium level would be indistinguishable from natural cell breakdown. It would look exactly like what everyone said my son's death looked like. I know this because I spent 31 years in clinical medicine. Simone married my son when she was 29. She had spent 4 of those years, before they met, working as a pharmaceutical technician. She would know this too. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about the letter. I'm scared, Mom. I think I'm handling it. I kept thinking about the life insurance policy he'd quietly changed, the way he'd left the box with Theo, the careful month-long delay he'd built in. He had been preparing. He had suspected, or feared, that something might happen to him, and still it had happened. The second week of April, I drove to the county courthouse and filed paperwork requesting a formal inquest. I had an attorney by then, a woman named Josephine, who a colleague of mine from the hospital had recommended, sharp and meticulous. Josephine told me the case was not strong, not yet. Elevated potassium in isolation was not enough. We needed more. She also told me something else. Before I did anything further, I needed to be careful. If Simone realized I was looking into this, and if Simone had done what I believed she had done, then I was not a harmless elderly woman in her eyes. I was a threat. I thought about that. I thought about it carefully. And then I called Theo and asked him one question. Had my son installed any security cameras in his home? Theo said yes. A system he put in about 8 months before he died. Doorbell camera. 2 interior cameras. 1 in the kitchen, 1 in the home office. The footage stored to a cloud account. I asked if Theo knew the login credentials. He did. My son had given them to him as a backup, the same day he installed the system. Josephine helped me subpoena the cloud footage legally, so that anything we found would be admissible. We requested footage from the 90 days prior to my son's death. The cloud service complied within 2 weeks. We found the footage on a Tuesday morning. Josephine called me and said, "Come to my office. Bring nothing. Tell no one." I drove 40 minutes in a state that I cannot fully describe. Not panic, something older than panic. In the footage, recorded on a Thursday evening, 11 days before my son died. The kitchen camera shows Simone at the stove. My son is at the kitchen table with his back to the camera. They're talking. You can't hear the conversation clearly, but you can see her movements. She prepares 2 mugs. She turns her back to the counter. Her hands move in a way that is too deliberate, too still afterward, like someone who is concentrating very hard on appearing not to concentrate. She carries both mugs to the table. My son drinks from his. Josephine had sent the footage to a forensic analyst before she called me. The analyst confirmed, in the 2 seconds where Simone's hands are at the counter with her back to the camera, her right hand makes a motion consistent with drawing from a syringe and pressing it into a liquid. Consistent with. Not definitive. But it was something. It was enough to reopen the investigation. What the investigators found, over the following weeks, is this. Simone had been in a relationship with a man named, and I am telling you this exactly as the detective told me, a man named Curtis, for approximately 14 months prior to my son's death. Curtis had a history of financial fraud. The wire transfers from the joint account, the ones my son couldn't trace, had gone to an LLC registered in Curtis's name. The second mortgage my son's forged signature had secured had been partly used to fund what appeared to be a travel business Curtis was running, which was, in fact, not a real business at all. Simone stood to collect nothing from the life insurance policy, because my son had changed it. She didn't know that yet. She had believed, when my son died, that she would receive $800,000. She was wrong. She was arrested on a Thursday in late May. The detective called me at 6 in the morning, and I sat on the edge of my bed and I didn't cry. I'd done most of the crying already, in the months between. What I felt was something else. Not relief exactly. Relief implies that something is over and nothing is over. My son is still gone. He will always be gone. But he was not forgotten. He was not explained away. He was seen. The trial is still pending as I record this. Josephine says it will take time. Evidence cases always do. I have learned in these months more about criminal investigation and forensic toxicology and estate law than I ever anticipated learning at 67. I have also learned things I already knew and had somehow let myself forget about the importance of asking questions when something doesn't feel right, about the particular cruelty of sitting quietly with a bad feeling because you don't want to cause trouble. My son called me 11 days before he died and told me where to look. He trusted me to look. I almost didn't. I almost let it go because letting it go felt like the safer thing, the less painful thing, the thing that wouldn't require me to sit in a courthouse filing paperwork or a lawyer's office watching kitchen footage, or a parking lot at 6 in the morning waiting for a phone to ring. He deserved better than that. He deserved someone who would look. There are things I want to say to anyone who finds themselves where I was, sitting in a waiting room, being handed a clipboard, being told an explanation that almost fits. Almost is not the same as does. You know the person you loved. You know what their life looked like and what their health looked like and what their voice sounded like at the end of a phone call. That knowledge is not nothing. That knowledge is evidence of a kind that no one can give you and no one can take away. Trust it. Then go find the rest. I am 67 years old. I wore the wrong shoes to my son's funeral. I spent 4 months turning over every stone I could find in the worst months of my life. And I would do it again, every single day, without hesitation. He was my son. That's enough of a reason. I've had a lot of time to sit with what happened. More time than I wanted, honestly. And what I keep coming back to isn't the court dates or the evidence or even the moment Josephine called me at 6 in the morning to tell me they had made the arrest. What I keep coming back to is a simple question my son asked me once, years ago, when he was maybe 19 or 20. He said, "Mom, how do you know when something is really wrong or when you're just scared?" And I told him, "You don't always know right away. But fear and truth feel different in your body if you've learned to pay attention." I spent 4 months learning to pay attention. What Simone did was a choice. Every single step of it, the forgery, the hidden account, the man she'd been financing with money that wasn't hers, the Thursday evening in the kitchen. Each one of those was a decision she made, and each one pulled her further from who she might have been. I don't say that with anger anymore. I said it with anger for a long time, and that was fair. But anger isn't what I want to carry for the rest of my life. What I want to carry is the understanding that people who deceive others on that scale don't arrive there overnight. They get there step by step, convincing themselves each time that this one thing, this one small compromise, doesn't really count. Until it does. Until it counts in the worst possible way. My son saw something was wrong, and he tried to handle it quietly. He was protecting people, Me, probably Simone too, in his way. That was who he was. Generous to the point of his own cost. I don't blame him for that. I would never blame him for that. But I think about how differently things might have gone if he had made one phone call earlier. Not to me necessarily, to anyone. A lawyer, a detective, a friend he trusted. The moment you stop carrying something alone is the moment other people can help you carry it. That is the thing I most want someone to hear, if they're sitting somewhere right now with a feeling they don't know what to do with. The feeling that something doesn't add up. The instinct that the explanation you've been given is the one that almost fits, but not quite. Don't talk yourself out of it. Don't decide it's too much trouble, or that you're probably wrong, or that asking questions will hurt someone's feelings. Ask anyway, look anyway, get the records, talk to the neighbor, open the box. I am 67 years old. I had never filed a legal inquest in my life before this year. I didn't know what a forensic cloud subpoena was. I learned. You learn what you need to learn when the person you love is depending on you to learn it. Intelligence isn't about what you already know. It's about what you're willing to find out. My son trusted me with that blue folder. He trusted me with the month-long delay, the careful instructions, the quiet way he prepared for something he hoped wouldn't happen. He trusted me to look when it did. I almost let that trust go unanswered, because grief is exhausting and the truth is hard, and it was easier, for a few weeks, to believe the simpler story. I'm glad I stopped believing the simpler story. He deserved the harder one, the real one, and I deserve to know it too.